Hi. The weather in Galway over the Christmas and New Year period has been fairly typical for the time of year, windy and wet with the odd clear spell. However, we had quite a cold snap at the beginning of December, so I thought I'd post a short update on how it impacted the pond and the birds that have come to rely on it over the last year. The cold weather lasted from around the beginning of December to the middle of the month, and for my garden in Galway City, it was the first real cold spell we've had this winter. As the temperature dropped to below freezing, ice formed in the pond as well as on the surface of the rainwater barrels around the garden. For the first couple of days I broke some of the ice to make sure the birds had access to fresh water, but as the week progressed the ice became thicker and harder to break. At this time of year the lower end of my garden is in the shade for all of the day. The sun just never rises high enough in the sky to shine on it. So the temperature never rose above zero during that week, and as the weather continued the ice got thicker and thicker on the pond. So much so that when I walked on it the ice didn't crack or creak at all. It was thick enough to bear my weight without any problem, and I could see it was quite thick. As you can see, I did all my own stunts in this video. When I did break a small hole in the ice, I could see that it was at least 6 centimetres thick, maybe thicker in places. That small hole subsequently froze, and the following morning the ice across that hole was thick enough to also stand on. So it was clear that the pond wasn't going to be much use to the birds while it remained frozen. Birds don't need that much water to drink from, and occasionally very shallow small puddles would form on the flat roof of the back garden studio, and birds would drink from it. However, these pools only formed when it was sunny as the frost melted, and that didn't happen too often during the cold spell. Also, even though they could drink from it, they couldn't bathe in it because they were too shallow, and the gutter that's also on that flat roof was completely frozen, so it wasn't any use to the birds for either drinking from or bathing. So my first solution was to take a plastic flower pot base, place it on top of another upturned flower pot to keep it off the ground, and hold it in place with a large stone. There was a couple of problems with that solution. The first was that the relatively small volume of water in that base froze quickly, even though I go out several times during the day to thaw it out with warm water. The other problem was that it was clear that the birds were as interested in using the water source to bathe in as to drink, and it was too small for the birds to get a good splash. So I found an even bigger stone base, which was much heavier and therefore could support plenty of birds perched on it at the same time. It got plenty of traffic. It does seem a little surprising to me that birds would want to get so thoroughly wet while the temperature is well below freezing, but the birds really couldn't get enough of the bath. Clearly bathing is essential to birds irrespective of the weather. And even though the stone base was even shallower than the plastic one, it seemed to stay free of ice for longer, even though I did have to keep it thawed. I know it looks like there's a danger that the base might crack by pouring hot water on it, but actually I'm only pouring the water over the layer of ice that's covering the bottom of the base rather than the base itself, and I'd have to do that 2 or 3 times a day to keep it free of ice. Anyway, on the 16th the temperature began to rise, the rains came, and the ice began to melt in the pond. Now that the birds can use the pond again, I've taken down the bird bath for now. I probably need to put it up again when the next cold spell arrives. It's clear that the birds need a place to drink and to bathe, even if it does get a little overcrowded at times.